Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.
Hello! Welcome to Behind the Mirror of Music. My name is Dannii Cohen. This week's guest is Adam B. Shapiro. This week we celebrate 60 years of Fiddler on the Roof with Adam B. Shapiro. Adam has been part of various productions of Fiddler over the years, in the role of Tevje and Rabbi for the National Yiddish Theatre Folksbiene and many other stagings. This month, he will be appearing in Axelrod's Performing Arts Center production of Fiddler on the Roof, playing Mordkhe and understudying Tevye and the Rabbi. Next to his many Fiddler appearances, Adam has starred in many other shows, including Ragtime, Beauty and the Beast, and The Golden Bride, as well as movies and TV shows, including The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and The Normal Heart with Jim Parsons. He is also starring in the upcoming movie Yaniv. I hope you will enjoy the show.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good.
Oh, it's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. What are you doing right now in your life and career?
Right now, I'm doing a lot of concert work. I just finished doing a concert at Feinstein's in Carmel, Indiana, which is right above Indianapolis, where I'm originally from. And I've got some Halloween work coming up. I'm doing a reading of a new musical that I don't think I can talk about yet. And actually a film that I made about 2 years ago is currently making its way through various film festivals and various Jewish film festivals in particular, and it's going to be in London
What is
in
exciting?
in November. The film is called Yaniv, and it is about a very popular card game in Israel, as I understand, called Yaniv. And the movie has created a fictional world of high stakes underground Yaniv games where people can play for big bucks. And it's a really fun movie, and it's going to be part of the London Jewish Film Festival on November 13th.
That sounds cool. There's really a lot of projects going on for you.
Yeah. This is what I do when I'm waiting, for another full production to pop up, is I get my hands in lots of things that I can do quickly, and of course it's even better when I can travel with them.
Yes.
And I'm going to really try to come to London.
How did you fall in love with music and acting?
I've loved it forever. I was singing when I was a very little boy. They used to have me parade through the living room singing the Indiana University fight song when I was 2 and 3, and I knew all the words. And I did a I did a talent show when I was in kindergarten, where I basically reenacted a scene from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And at the end of it, the audience applauded and I was hooked. It was that moment of, when you look back and you see it happening and the applause happens, there's just that moment of, uh-oh, uh-oh. He just got a taste of something he really liked. And I never really considered doing anything else. The older I got, the more I studied, the more I worked with various teachers and professionals, and I really never wavered. I knew I was going to specialize in it in college. And then I pretty much always knew that right after college, I was going to move to New York City. And that is what I did. And as of September 1st this year, I have been a New York City actor for 20 years,
It's
which means I may not be that young anymore. What are you going to do?
what was your first professional role?
My first professional role was, let me think about this here. The first role I ever got paid for was I was in the ensemble of Annie Get Your Gun at the Barn Theater in Augusta, Michigan. They're a summer stock company, and I was hired for their season. And the first show I was in for them was Annie Get Your Gun. And I was in the ensemble, so I got to, sing in the bigger numbers, and uh it was a lot of fun, and I was baffled by the idea that I was getting paid to do a show. I wasn't getting paid much, but I was getting paid to do a show just like I would do at school, just like I would do in the summers in community theaters. But this time I was getting paid to do it. And it sort of was this moment of reassurance that yes, you can do this as a profession. And blessedly now I get paid more than that.
You have a big connection to Fiddler on the Roof, which is celebrating 60 years this year. What do you think that makes this story so enduring to the audience and actors?
Oh man. Well, Fiddler on the Roof was the first musical I was ever in when I was 9 years old. I was a 9-year-old Muttle the Tailor in summer camp. And that was my first exposure to it. I had heard the name, but I had never seen the show or the movie until that summer. And what I think I might have taken for granted back then was that this was my family's story. This was my family is all from Eastern Europe and Russia, and being able to see this show, which has just about every emotion there could be, joy, sadness, anger, fear. I feel like we could be doing the movie Inside Out right now with all of these,
Yes.
with all of these emotions. But what I don't think I realized until I was a bit older was how much this was my history. And prior to 1964, Jewish audiences has not been able to see their history on a Broadway stage like that. And I think there's just so much in it that's relatable, whether you're a mama, a papa, a daughter, or a son. There's just so much to relate to. And I think that's true for all audiences, not just Jewish ones. But for Jewish audiences, there's an added layer of neshama or soul in Yiddish, knowing that this is where so many of us came from and where so many of our families originated. And for actors, in particularly Jewish actors, I mean, well, truly, I can only speak for myself, but it's such a privilege to be able to get up and reenact this story, knowing that although, Tevye and Golda are fictional characters, this easily could have been my great-great-grandfather. You know, this easily could have been my family. And you know, Jews have always had to be adaptable. They've always had to be adaptable to change. Whether it was in ancient Egypt, whether it was, you know, in any number of countries before pogroms or wars, and even up to today. And that's what Fiddler, at its core, that is what it shows, is the Jewish resilience in the face of adversity and needing to adapt to new situations. And that's why one of my favorite moments in the show is towards the very, very end. It's after they've all been told that they have to leave, and after they've sung on a tefka, and everybody's getting ready to go, and Chava comes to say goodbye. And of course, Tevye won't look at her, Tevye won't talk to her, and he won't let Golda talk to her. And finally, there's this moment when she's about to leave, where Tevye turns to Seitel and just says, "God be with you," as in he's telling her to say this to Chava. And it's just the idea that even when we think we can't bend another inch without breaking, something will happen to give us perspective, and we tend to rediscover what's important. So even though in that moment Tevye can't bring himself to fully forgive Chava, or to, you know, drop his own shields and say goodbye to her himself, he wants to let her know that the door is still partially open. Will it ever open further? Who knows? Who knows? Because of course the end of Fiddler is ripe with question marks. Do they make it to America? Do Muttle and Seitel join them before World War I, let alone World War II? Do Huddle and Perchik find each other? Is there any reconciliation between Chava and her parents? What happens to Sprinza and Bielka? That's something I've always been fascinated about. And but even with all the questions, and even as sad as the ending is, I think there's a part of the audience that knows that whatever happens, these people will survive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so of every time for every Jew in the world, I think, because it's in the past but ongoing, forever ongoing, this story.
As I've said to many people, I would love to get to a point where Fiddler doesn't feel quite so relevant.
Absolutely.
I'd love to get to a place where it feels like something from the past.
Yes.
And not something that is still so applicable today. Baruch Hashem, hopefully we will.
How do you see for yourself the character of Tevye?
I love Tevye. I played him for the first time when I was a senior in high school. It was one of the hardest tasks I'd ever done, because at 17, how much do you really know? But I loved him, and I got to understudy him in the big Yiddish off-Broadway production, which was one of the biggest honors, one could ever have. And this year I finally got to step back into his boots full time. I've done 2 different productions this year, one in Muncie, Indiana, and one in Houston, Texas. Both times playing Tevye. And I find that each time I play him, I discover something new.
Yes.
And it's fascinating. It depends so much on who the director is and who the other actors are, because I'm personally not an actor that can just get up and do the exact same thing every time, particularly from production to production. So, for example, my Golda in Indiana was very different from my Golda in Texas. So I couldn't just do the same thing
True.
with both, because she was giving me different things, which is great, which I love. So my task when I was doing the 2 productions this year is to really try to be aware of Tevye's emotions, and because Tevye is very reactionary. Someone tells him something and he's not going to repress, he's going to react right away. Huddle tells him that she and Perchik are engaged, and his first response is, "Oh, no, you're not." And of course, when Chava tells him that she wants to marry Fiedka, his first response is, "Are you out of your mind?" There's no sense with him of, okay, let me sit with this and see how I really feel. He'll end up discovering it. But he's very reactionary. So the question is, when he reacts, what's the first emotion he grabs onto? Because a lot of times it's immediate anger. And I see people do that a lot. And I wanted to try to see what else there was. Because the last thing you can call Tevye is one-dimensional.
True.
So I really wanted to experiment and see, as I'm working and as these situations come up and as I get these different things from different actors, what other emotions are on Tevye's mental shelf, if you were, that he can reach for. And I think he loves sarcasm. I think he loves to laugh. Like when Muttel says to him, when he's stalling, telling him that he's the match for Tzeitel, and Tevye finally yells, "Who is it?" And he goes, "It's me, it's me, myself." I just started laughing. I found myself laughing on the way to anger and frustration. But I'm just like, because here's this skinny tailor with his glasses, using all this tailor talk, saying that he's the right match for my daughter. That's hilarious. And so I'm just going, it's him himself. Either you're out of your mind or you're crazy. You must be crazy, and then the anger starts to bubble up like, this is ridiculous. Who do you think you are telling me this? And so it's these bridges of emotion. The other one, the production I did in Indiana, our Golda, when she would come in to tell me that Chava and Fiedka had gotten married, so often when Tevye finally says Chava's dead to us, he yells it. it's a expression of anger. The way this particular Golda was bringing it to me, first of all, we were standing very close together, and, you know, having just done Do You Love Me a few scenes ago, I'm like, I don't want to scream in her face. I don't, she's coming to me to ask what to do. And she's distraught. So I'm going to do what needs to be done, but I'm going to do it gently so I don't scare her. So for that scene, for that production, I took the road of what I called the quiet authority, because I mean, she really is inches away from my face, clutching my hands, saying B'chavala, and I just put a hand on top of hers, and I just say, Chava is dead to us. We will forget her. And then she tried to say something, and I just went, no, go home. And then, and just staying very still and very quiet, but looking her directly in the eyes, so she knows this is not a discussion. This is, I'm not yelling, but Papa has spoken, to the point where she wouldn't dare try to contradict. And I loved doing the scene that way. And then in Houston, that Golda gave me something very different. So I did take it a little back to the Chava's dead to us, you know. And it's fascinating how I discover as Tevye different facets, different possible facets of his personality, based on who I'm playing opposite at the time. And I think that's the thing with Tevye. He's not static. He's not I don't want to play him as a caricature ever. Mm-hmm. And the only way to avoid caricature is to try to be as honest as you can. And, you know, I've had the great good fortune of working with some amazing directors on Fiddler, certainly both in Indiana and Houston. But I must give a very big shout out of love to the legendary Joel Gray, who directed Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish and made it so personal, not just for him, but for all of us, that his input was just invaluable.
Well, it seems like such an amazing production to have it in Yiddish, so close to its actual origins, story, and well, the people all came from.
Oh, it was outstanding. I had been working with the National Yiddish Theatre Folksbiene on and off since 2008. So by the time Yiddish Fiddler came around, we had been working together for 10 years. And, you know, they had been teaching me Yiddish, and we'd done lots of projects together. And then they announced that Yiddish Fiddler was happening, and I said, oh, I must be in this production. And knowing I would still have to go through all the audition process, but blessedly it all worked out. And one of the most extraordinary things about Yiddish Fiddler, well, one of the many, was that it was only supposed to be a 2-month run. When we signed on we started rehearsals in June of 2018, And I was fully planning on being unemployed by Rosh Hashanah of 2018. And then we sold out the entire run before we opened. And it was amazing. And I'll never forget, there was a moment on the night of our first preview, our first performance, where we're all standing backstage waiting to enter for tradition, Traditzie in Yiddish. And it suddenly occurred to me that we had to stack up to every other production of Fiddler that this audience had seen, and they've seen a lot. And our production was very minimal in terms of design. We were originally in a fairly small space, and I was like, is this gonna measure up? In truth, we didn't have a roof. At the beginning of the show, we had a pile of chairs and tables put together in such a way that our fiddler could climb up it and stand on a chair at the top and play there. So our roof really was symbolic. But luckily I didn't have a lot of time to think about that, because the next thing I knew, bum ba dum bum 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 ba, and then we all held hands and bum 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 tradition, and we were on, and we finished the opening number, and we were all running back to the dressing room, and suddenly the audience just erupted. The geschrei that came from them, the shout. I have been in shows where we didn't get that kind of response at the end, like at the curtain call. They were so enthusiastic, and we all just kind of stopped in our tracks and looked at each other. And I think that, for me and for many of us, was the moment that we sort of realized that we might have something really special, more special than any of us had realized. And over the course of the next, initially year and a half, because we ended up extending for 6 months at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and then we transferred to Stage 42 and ran just about 11 months. And, along the way, we recorded our cast album. We won awards. We raised money for various charities. We had so many people come to see us, and so many celebrities. I remain so honored. I think we might have been the last show that Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg saw before she passed the next year. And it just I call it, it was a very Dayenu experience, because how we always say Dayenu at Pesach.
Yes.
And it's the idea of, if God had done this but not this, Dayenu. If God had done this but not this, Dayenu. Because even if it had only been that first 2 months, it would have been enough. We would have all found ourselves wishing we had more time, but I think we would have been still very grateful for the experience that we had. But the fact that we kept extending and all this wonderful stuff kept happening, it was just incredible. And then, of course, the pandemic happened.
Yes.
And we had already closed by then. We were luckily not a casualty of the pandemic. We got our closing night party. We got our sort of closure. No pun intended. But then during during the pandemic, we did all of these online things. We did these big online, spectacular shows for the Folksbiene Theater. I directed a big Hanukkah special for them. And then in 2022, we got to come back for 2 months for a little return engagement at a different off-Broadway theater. But it was so wild after 2 years, and after 2 years of utter tsuris, to then be able to come back, and almost everyone in the cast came back. We had a couple new people because certain people had gotten other jobs and couldn't come back. But the majority of the cast came back, and that first day of rehearsal, it was like a family reunion. It was, and we discovered that so much of it was still in our bodies and in our minds. And by day 2, we were doing the opening number full out. I think it was the second day we had a lot of press there. And so we did the opening number for them so they could get footage and whatnot. And I was like, God, we haven't done this in 2 years and we all remember it. It was so great. And of course, it was at the end of the year, so we were all together for Hanukkah. And, we would light candles backstage. And not all of the cast was Jewish. I would say we were about 50-50. But all of the non-Jewish members of the cast sort of became Jewish by proxy. And because they were all just so interested in the customs, in the traditions, and and they just became very mindful of all of the Jewish traditions and holidays because we were all a family. It was really it was extraordinary is the word I have to use. I would never have dreamed, even Fiddler, that a Yiddish language production would play in the theater district in New York for a year plus and be so and resonate with audiences on such a huge level, whether they were Jewish or not. Because we had a lot of people tell us afterwards, I'm not Jewish, but I was so moved by this production, and I oddly felt I was seeing my family's story. And I said, well, I wish I could remember who said this to me, but someone once said, in specificity, there is universality. Because if you really try to tell a specific family story or a specific culture story, and you do it correctly and you do it with reverence and mindfulness, people who aren't that culture will see it and realize that something very similar happened to their people and their ancestors. So I love that we got to be this this beautiful example of family and love and Jewishness and at the same time have non-Jews see it and still feel somehow like they were seeing themselves. I thought that was so cool.
True, there's such a universal story and yet so personal at the same time.
Yeah. And that's why when people try to, because I've seen a couple of productions of Fiddler where they tried to downplay the Jewishness a bit, thinking that they were making it more universal by doing it. And I said, oh, you didn't do yourself any favors with that, because if you're just trying to be general, it's going to get messy because you're not paying attention to detail.
We did that in the Netherlands as well with the production, and it was a real mess.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying any specific productions. I'm just saying I've seen it.
It's one that always angered me because
Me too.
We had such great production, then suddenly this strange, it was the most recent one, so the Netherlands really needs to have another one.
Yeah. Maybe in Yiddish.
Yes.
I'd come to the Netherlands. I've never been. I'd love to.
The original Dutch Tevye was also a legend. I don't know if you heard of him, Lex Schoutsmit.
No.
Al Prince later made him one of the West End Tevye's because he was so good in his role.
Oh, how great.
Yes.
Well, I mean, goodness, I don't know that there's many countries in the world that Fiddler has not played in by this point. Do you know where Fiddler is one of the most popular shows in Japan? They love it. They feel like it's a Japanese story.
I think I saw a clip of the original Japanese production. It was really amazing, really well sang as well.
I love it. There's I somewhere on YouTube, someone's done a big montage of clips from various productions in various languages, all doing tradition. So the song goes, and as it progresses, they switch to a different language and a different production. And I'm proud to say that Yiddish is one of them.
Could be.
But I'm sure that there is a clip from a Dutch production in that. I'm 100% sure.
I hope it was from the original because that was in the 60s, so I don't know if they got the clip.
I can't attest to that, but
I think the only clip online from Lexus Tevye is when he reprised the role a few years later. So.
Mm-hmm. We had a visit early in the run from Topol, Chaim Topol, who played Tevye in the movie.
Yes.
And several times on stage, but he came back and spoke to us at intermission, which people didn't usually do, but I think he had to leave early. But he was one of the first celebrities to come see the show. And I was just so dumbstruck when he was there. I'm like, this is movie Tevye. Like, this is, even if you've never seen the stage version, if you've watched the movie, this is him. It was incredible.
And could you tell more about the Yiddish theater?
Oh, the National Yiddish Theatre Folksbiene they're wonderful. They've been in operation now for over 100 years. You're probably aware, but in the United States, Yiddish theater used to be huge.
Yes.
At the beginning of the 20th century, it was a full-on industry, and there were many theater companies, film companies. They even had their own union, the Hebrew Actors Union. And unfortunately now, the Folksbiene is really the only full-time company left in the United States. But oh my goodness, they do such incredible things. I began working with them in as I said, in 2008. It was a moment where I couldn't find work to save my life. And at that point, I spoke no Yiddish, but I saw an audition notice for them, and I I said, well, I've got nothing to lose. And my ancestors spoke it up to a few generations ago, so it's got to be somewhere in there. And I auditioned first for a play, and I didn't get cast in that play, but considering I didn't speak, I did pretty good at the audition. And I said, I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind. And a few months later, they called my manager at the time because they were getting ready to do a musical. And they said, we think Adam might be right for it. And they brought me in. It was for a brand new musical adaptation of Isaac Bashevis Singer's Gimple Tom, Gimple the Fool. And they ended up casting me as Gimple. And I was very honest with them. I said, I would love to play this part, but you need to understand you will be starting from scratch with me. And God bless, their reaction was, we can teach you. And I said, if you're game, I'm game. And within that first few months, not only did I start rehearsing Gimple, but they asked me to do a series of concerts with them, highlighting the music of Avram Goldfaden, who was a big Yiddish operetta composer. And he wrote probably his most well-known song is Rosenkäse mit Mandeln, Raisins and Almonds, which became a very famous Yiddish folk song. And over the next few years, I got to do a lot with them. I got to learn, a lot of the history of Yiddish music, Yiddish operetta, do readings of both classic Yiddish plays and new adaptations of stories. And in 2013, they mounted an incredible production of the Megillah of Itzik Monger, which is, a telling of the Purim story. And it was staged in the manner of a Polish circus, which I thought was just, I said, I've never seen anything like this before. And the next year they revived it and someone couldn't come back. So I got to step in and replace them in that second year production. And I loved it. And in 2015, they began a partnership with the Museum of Jewish Heritage in Battery Park in New York City. This is the New York Holocaust Museum. And to inaugurate the space, they did a staging of an operetta from the 1920s called The Golden Bride, Die Goldene Kalle. And this was something that we had done, that we had done concert versions of over the last 2 years. And they finally got to stage a full production of it. And this was somewhat larger than the productions they had done up to that point. But now they were in this bigger space and they wanted to do something special. And the production, kind of like Fiddler, was this surprise hit. And it was, we got rave reviews in the New York Times and in all the various publications. We were nominated for 2 Drama Desk Awards.
Oh,
Yeah, we had no idea that this, cutesy little operetta from the 1920s would charm everyone so much, but it did. And I think that, and this showed them that they could do larger scale productions now. And the next year they did a new imagining of America, the Golden Land, which I wasn't in, but I saw, and it was phenomenal. And it was very funny because Muttel Didner, who's the associate artistic director, and a good friend of mine, he pulled me aside when I came to see the Golden Land, and he said, "I can't tell you anything, but next year we're doing something huge." And I said, "Okay, you can't give me even a little hint?" And he said, "No. If I give you a little hint, I'll end up telling you everything, and I can't do it." And I thought it meant maybe we were going to do a tour of the Golden Bride. And then at the end of the year, they announced Fiddler in Yiddish. And I was like, "Oh, didn't see that one coming." So, but I just think they're wonderful, because I think they've got one eye on the past and one eye on the future, because they want to maintain the beautiful history and legacy of the Yiddish theater. But at the same time, they want to make room for new voices and new ideas and new writers. And last year, at the end of the year, they did a production called Amid Falling Walls.
Yes.
And it was essentially a review of music that was written by teenagers, I think, all young composers before and during the Holocaust. And there was a progression of how Jews were able to make music even as their rights were being taken away, and then how music became part of the revolution in the darkest days of the Holocaust. And I really, I was very impressed with the production, because something like that could get very bogged down, because there's so much sadness and so much horror in that historical time period. But they were able to take their audiences on a journey that had ups as well as downs. And I was really impressed how they were able to do that. And of course, I knew most of the people in the show.
Yes.
Several of our fiddler cast was in the show, and the lady who was my leading lady as Gimple was in the show, and I was so thrilled to see her back on stage. So I think they're really, and of course they were the primary producers of the musical Harmony, which played on Broadway last year with music by Barry Manilow. And they did that first at the museum, same place where Fiddler opened. And then they moved to Broadway, and they were, because it's such a Jewish story, even though it wasn't in Yiddish, they felt like it was very appropriate for them to take it on. And they did a beautiful job with it.
I really think I followed Harmony from when it started on Broadway, and I thought it was such a beautiful show. I really think it deserved a much longer run.
Theater is unpredictable,
Yes.
unfortunately, and it opened in the fall, so it opened after the Tony's season and after summer, which is of course when a lot of people come, and the tourism tends to fall off a bit in the autumn. So they, I think that could have been part of it. Because as far as I knew, they were running well during the holidays, if I remember correctly.
It looked like it was
But
doing so well at first.
yeah, but alas, theater is unpredictable, and there are no guarantees. But I thought the production was beautiful. There were a couple of my Fiddler castmates who were in it. And I was of course thrilled for them. And I thought it was a beautiful production, and I of course I wish it had run longer, but I was very happy for everyone that they got to move to Broadway, and people got to see the story, even if it was only for a few months.
Yeah, but we'll tour at some point or something.
Hopefully,
Yes,
that would be great. Or start to be done regionally.
yes. Do you still have a dream role in the?
Oh, I have so many dream roles. Um, uh, oh goodness. Well, my biggest dream at the moment is to make my Broadway debut in any production. Um, there are so many existing roles that I would want. I would love to do both of the leading roles in La Cage aux Folles. I would love to do the prom, Barry and the prom, another Jewish character. Um, there's a few of the really classic musicals that I haven't done yet that I would love to do. Alfred Doolittle and My Fair Lady.
Yes.
I would love to do oh, I had another one. Oh, Guys and Dolls. Dying to
Yes.
do Guys and
Yes.
Dolls. I would love to take a crack at Phantom of the Opera as one of the owners of the opera
Yes.
house. Mystery. Will they all walk out? This is mystery. Um, so if it comes back to New York, I'm gonna fight for it. But really and truly, when people ask me my dream roles, my biggest dream role is one that I get to originate.
Oh,
One that is either written for me or written and I get to do it first. Because I've gotten to originate a couple of roles in in smaller shows over the year, and I just always I mean it's hard because you have no example, but it's just so rewarding to know that when people see you in the role, you're the only one they've seen, and you're going to be the example for the next person who does it. And in particular, in the last couple of years, and I cannot name titles, but I've worked in some development stages of two, in particular, new musicals that I could not love more. And I really hope that both of these shows have a future, and that I get to continue to be a part of their futures. And I'm sure that there are writers that I haven't met yet, or writers that are still, for all I know, in junior high, um, who are going to be the new voices in 10 years, 20 years. And I just pray that I'm still around to be a part of it.
I hope so too. When there's so much being brought to the world every day.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's just a waiting game. Waiting, putting yourself out there as much as possible, and then trusting that the right projects will present themselves. Baruch Hashem, we hope. Tu, tu, tu.
There anything you would love to add to this interview that hasn't been said that you would love people to know?
Oh, goodness. I would just encourage people to support art, support local art, support artists. There's so much ugliness in the world, and art and music and theater is how we combat that. And how we bring beauty to the world. So I just hope that everybody continues to support the arts and, of course, Broadway, but also smaller theater companies in all over the world. Because I think it's our best defense against all the ugliness and all the division, because art brings us together. Fiddler is a wonderful example of that. So I would just support art and support artists.
Absolutely true. Thank you so much for this wonderful interview.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me. This was lovely. Thank you so much for asking me to do this, and I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing more.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining.
Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.